You want to like flip a coin for who goes first? Or?
Well,
I rotated them on there.
Victor wants to go second in the next one, so you guys can go first in this one.
All right, that's fine.
Okay, so the question for this round, and just so you guys, you know the rules, I assume, 1.5 minutes for opening statements, 5 minutes of debate, minute close, and then question and answers. If you start to go over time, I will punch you. So, feeling like it. All right, so the first question is, the Keystone XL pipeline was recently rejected by President Obama and has caused outrage among Republicans and even led to threatening remarks by Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper. Was President Obama right to reject the deal, or does the pipeline serve as an important step towards energy independence? Will?
Thank you. Keystone XL pipeline is an essential part of America's long-term energy security. With widespread political instability around the world, America needs reliable access to oil and natural gas here in the Western Hemisphere. By moving forward the construction of the Keystone pipeline, we can help reduce our dependence on OPEC nations and create between 15 and 20,000 good American jobs. President Obama's decision to delay the pipeline is just another example of political pandering to base environmental activists. The pipeline is clearly in America's best interest. Upon its completion, it will carry more than 700,000 barrel of oils per day from Canada to our refineries down in Houston, Texas, and Port Arthur, Louisiana, providing energy and jobs for decades to come. And most importantly, it will reduce our dependence on oil from Saudi Arabia and Venezuela, which each provide us with 1 million barrels of oil per day. And now let's consider the campaign promise of our current president. When campaigning in 2008, then Senator Obama promised to use the full resources of the federal government and private sector to eliminate the need for oil from the entire Middle East within 10 years. Well, here's his chance to do it. And he decided to cater to his campaign donor to San Francisco, rather than side with the American people and American jobs. The Obama administration's decision to block the pipeline is possibly the lowest point in his presidency. This has wide bipartisan support, and it's a clear-cut decision. And if he's so concerned with stimulus packages, here's one in the private sector that can create jobs.
Hi everybody, thanks for coming out. This is a really important topic, and President Obama is correctly blocking this legislation extending the Keystone Pipeline. It's correct because, unlike what my Republican friend tells you, it actually won't help reduce our dependence on foreign oil. It won't create jobs in the United States, and it won't lower the price of gas that you have to put in your car. Here are the facts. Firstly, the Keystone Pipeline would not have decreased our dependence on foreign oil because the oil was never destined for U.S. markets. The vast majority of the oil companies that will receive oil on the American end of the pipeline have stated that they will export their oil for increased profits. Secondly, it would not have decreased American gas prices. With this permit that the president is blocking, TransCanada, the company building the pipeline, would have been able to drain oil reserves in the Midwest of the United States and would have been able to export that oil as well. TransCanada has stated that this will increase oil prices in the United States, especially in the already struggling Midwest. Thirdly, TransCanada has grossly exaggerated the amount of jobs Keystone would create. They state now, and the Republicans like to state, that it would create 20,000 jobs. When they originally filed the permits, they stated the correct number, and that's in between 3,500 and 4,200 jobs. Finally, Keystone's extremely dangerous to our environment. The pipeline that the president has blocked would be an extension of a pipeline that has already leaked 12 times this year. TransCanada states that these are minor leaks of 5 to 10 gallons each, but on May 7th, 2011, 20,000 gallons leaked out in North Dakota. The president's job is to protect the United States and not improve the economy of Canada.
Okay. How do you want to handle the 5-minute debate? Just a free flow?
One can start and then we just free flow.
Excellent.
All right, well, there was a number of statements made there. Number one, I never said it was going to lower gas prices. This isn't going to have some instant magic effect of lowering gas prices. Having a broader energy strategy, possibly, which might be a nice idea here, if I could put that forward, would, if we open up our natural lands and resources, could do that. So I'm not going to try and make that argument as drastically going to.
Why would we continue to fund this dirty, antiquated fuel and we should be putting this money that is going to be spent on this pipeline into research and development on renewable energy, on natural gas, something like that?
Well, make no mistake about it, fossil fuels will power America for decades to come. There's no way around that. I can't shove a solar panel on my gas. So while we plan for the future, which is important, to put wind, solar, nuclear energy, if the Democrats would allow it, I think that's moving in the right direction. But the environmental issue is largely overblown here. The Keystone Pipeline, there is a present Keystone Pipeline that goes from Canada, parts of Alberta, down to the Midwest now. This Keystone XL extension is just going to put it farther south so we can use it in our refineries.
Yeah, well, and it's already been an environmental catastrophe. I'd say 20,000 gallons spilled in North Dakota this year. That's a problem. I mean, why should we be funding something like that, an extension of something like that, just so it could increase these spills all over the United States?
Well, it's talking about spills all over the United States. What you're suggesting is that we not develop any of the domestic resources we have here. Up in the Dakotas, we have tremendous amounts of natural gas, shale, coal, all of which are going to be used to power the future. And so, yes, there's some risk. Yes, pipelines spill. But for almost 100 years now, we've had pipelines in the U.S. that deliver our oil all around the country. Here in New York City, how do you think you get your natural gas?
But these,
sometimes they leak. Sometimes there's problems.
this pipeline's not going to power our country. Every single company that is going to get the oil that's coming from into Port Arthur already has stated that the majority of this oil will not go into the United States. TransCanada's CEO during their conference already stated that most of this oil is going to be exported out of the United States. It's a big lie that they're going to be pushing oil in this country. The only economy that this is going to help is the economy of the oil companies, which already get enough help from the government.
So we should not develop our resources here. We shouldn't use anything.
We shouldn't develop it by Keystone.
Go to China. That's what you're saying, because this is going to go west of Vancouver, be shipped to Asia, and not go through our refineries. That's the only other.
Enough of our oil comes from Canada already.
It is. They're our #1 supplier right now.
Exactly.
Canadian oil.
So we're going to have a Canadian company develop this pipeline to exploit American resources.
Exploit American resources?
They're going to be able to take the oil that's under the Midwest. It's already part of the permit, and they're going to be able to export it as they see fit. That's exploiting American resources. I want to defend America. He wants to defend Canada, which is very odd for the Republican Party, let me say.
I don't think we're defending Canada. I mean, the point is,
Well, TransCanada is the company.
there's tens of
It sounds like a
thousands
Canadian
of jobs
company to me.
connected to American energy here in Louisiana,
3,500.
in Texas, and never mind the 10, 15,000 they're going to be created by building this pipeline. There's no reason.
I don't know.
why-
TransCanada says it's more like 3,500 to 4,200.
I mean, there's 3.5 hours ago, there was a vote in the Senate that only failed by 4 votes to push this through. It says bipartisan support, senators out in the Midwest, in their states.
The Iraq War had bipartisan support too. Do you think that was a good idea?
Oh, Jesus.
Well, I mean, we shouldn't be pushing bipartisan support about this. That doesn't make it right.
But the people in their states know they want this to be developed, they want the jobs, and they want to provide the American energy here. And it's not like the idea that it's all going to be exploited or exported. It's just not
Well,
true.
Valero is the top beneficiary of Keystone XL. That's not an American company, and they already said that most of the capacity of this pipeline is going to be exported. And it's going to, because they're a foreign trade, they don't get taxed by the American government.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there, gentlemen. Now it's time for question and answer. Do we have questions from the audience? Yes, John.
I just have one question regarding DJ's statement about how we shouldn't be supporting a Canadian oil company. There are a lot of foreign companies right now that hire in America that hire American workers, use American resources, create American jobs, and pay taxes in America. I could like Mercedes-Benz, Mitsubishi, Toyota. I can go on and on about the number of foreign companies that come to America, set up shop, and create American jobs. If they're hiring, if a company is hiring Americans using American resources, doesn't that not stimulate the economy, even if it is a foreign company?
I don't think this will stimulate the economy, especially not in the long term, which is everything that Republicans forget. All of their policies are short-term policies. This is going to allow a Canadian company to exploit our resources.
But still hire American workers.
3,500 people, is that worth exploiting all of our oil?
Well, 3,500 is greater than 0.
But why don't we use an American company to do this if it's such a big matter? Or why don't we have an American company research new fuels, new energy technologies? Why is the government spending money on this? Why is the government going to allow them to exploit our land? It's a Canadian company, it shouldn't be doing that.
Next question? Yeah, TW.
Bill Clinton said last week that he believes the president should accept the fact that the Keystone Pipeline is necessary. Stephen Harper 2 weeks ago said that any oil that would be going to America will be going to Mexico if the Keystone Pipeline isn't built. President Obama ran on that there is no silver bullet of energy independence, and everything that we have in this country ought to be used to lower energy prices for everyday Americans to ease into the transition of alternative fuels. Is this not going in stark contrast to what the president campaigned on, what Bill Clinton is saying, and what Stephen Harper, Prime Minister of Canada, is telling us will happen?
I don't know when we started caring what the Prime Minister of Canada has to say about our economy, but I think that this is just a Republican red herring to aid the oil companies. It's not going to really help the American economy. It's going to create 3,500 temporary jobs, and it doesn't really get us to energy independence. If we want to lower the oil prices, if we want to create competition in the oil companies, if we want to create competition in the energy sector, we should stop sending $40 billion in subsidies to the oil companies, on top of them not having to pay taxes because they get huge tax breaks. That's what's going to get us in energy independence that President Obama promised, not furthering Shell or Valero.
More questions? Yeah, Eric.
There was a discrepancy between the number of potential jobs listed in the permit and what's being said now, 3,500 to 10,000. I was wondering what you have to say about this discrepancy.
Well, that's going to come down to the local level in terms of the companies and how they work that out. But I mean, numbers are going to vary, but this is a pretty substantial construction project. And so, at least for a year or 6 months, this will create American jobs.
And we all know that when a company has the opportunity to, they're going to spend more money to create more jobs, right? That's the way that this economy has been going during this recession. They've had the money in the reserves, but they haven't created jobs. They're not going to hire 20,000 people. They're going to hire as little as possible. We need to stop acting like the market's going to solve all of our problems, because corporations are greedy. They're self-interested.
Well, that's the way you run a business. You want to earn.
Exactly. So we need. Why should the government be?
Why is the government in this decision at all? I mean, I think we should address that point.
Because
why
it's American
the president
land.
is even in
It's
this
American
role.
resources.
Well, it's unfortunate because he would have nothing to say about it except that it crosses an international border. Because when the governors of all the states in the Midwest want this to happen.
Except for the Republican governor of Nebraska, who asked the president to please not have the Keystone XL pipeline built.
Fundamentally not true. There was an initial story
Except
back
that's-
a few months ago, and they wanted to have an environmental review done at the state level so they could run it around the environmentally sensitive Sandhills region of Nebraska. They did that, and now Governor Heineman has said clearly for the last 2 months, let's do it. We're just waiting for the president to sign it. The Montana governor is blaming the Nebraska governor for not having it go through fast enough, and so everyone wants it done. And it's a sad thing that the President of the United States is preventing governors and at the state level from making these decisions and pushing this through. And frankly, the state commissions and the environmental commissions at the state level can do it a lot faster than the EPA, State Department, or every federal regulatory body.
All right, thank you very much, gentlemen. Now, Eric and Vikram. Okay, good. All right, the next question. Warren Buffett recently supported a 30% income surtax on anyone making over $1 million. This has come under fire from a great deal of people who say it disincentivizes capital investment. What are your thoughts on the plan? Will it help in the march towards solving our debt crisis? And I guess we're going with Eric first.
Yeah. The Buffett rule is a proposal based on basic fairness. Under the Paying a Fair Share Act of 2012, it would entail a minimum effective tax rate of 30% for all those making over $1 million a year. This plan would ensure that American millionaires pay as large a share of their income as middle and working class Americans. The economic crisis in America has been a time of hardship for all citizens. However, it can also serve as a catalyst for change. The Buffett rule would ask those who have flourished in our country to give back to the system that ensured their prosperity.
For the second time in this school year, I'm debating about Barack Obama's plan to tax rich people. First, it was the American Jobs Act, where the $447 billion stimulus would have to, according to the Democratic Party agenda, be funded by rich people only. Now it is the buffer rule. Barack Obama's plan is to ensure that those making at least $1 million a year, you explained it, that's $3 out of 10, that's 30% to the government. I initially guessed that this is because Washington knows how to spend money better than rich people, but then I realized I was wrong within a split second. Washington actually makes Fordham University look like expert money managers. Now the White House has made it very clear that this rule should be implemented as part of a broader plan to reform our tax code. The President, in addition to supporting the bucket rule, does not want to extend the Bush tax cuts for all people making over $200,000 a year, while at the same time increasing the tax on dividends. Now to me, these are all super tacky moves by the administration. Super tacky moves, all caps. They're manipulating the American people by making it seem like the tax code is as simple as 1, 2, 3. This is not the case. The tax code is a complete mess, as you can see here. This is from 1979, and it's a lot longer now. I believe that the members of the Republican Party truly love the United States, and the members of the Democratic Party who truly love the United States agree that Washington folks unnecessarily rewarding corporations in order to help themselves get reelected is wrong. But the current tax code, as can be seen, lends itself to this. As can be seen, the tax lawyers are hired simply to help corporations manipulate the tax code as much as possible. Washington folks know that nobody will take the time to read the tax code, so it presents an easy way to help certain corporations that will later help the Washington folks keep their job. This is disgusting. The president's focus should not be on taxing rich people. It should be on overhauling the whole system. He can do that. He's the president. The president has a lot of power in our era. He has to take charge. If he wants to do it, he can have it.
All right. I didn't realize props were part of the debate here, but well done. Okay, go to it. Eric, do you want to start?
Okay, just fundamentally, I want to say it's about income inequality in this past recession has grown. The rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer. The Congressional Research Service found that 250,000 millionaires right now don't pay enough in federal taxes to satisfy this Buffett rule, which is 30% of $1 million. No one's starving because they only have $700,000 to live on a year.
Well, yeah, I agree. I mean, in a recession, there's going to be more income inequality. That's why you don't want to have a recession. So what the president and what Washington should do is, since Washington has so much power now, the ball's in their court. They need to put in place policies that will grow the economy, and then that's taking care of income inequality in a way, in the right way, and then let the states take care of, well, that's theoretical stuff. But so the way you should grow the economy is lower the taxes even more, reduce regulations, grow jobs. I talked about the tax lawyers in my opening speech. I mean, these are intelligent people who, what they're doing for society is helping corporations not give money back to Washington. But if you make this about 99% shorter, you can get rid of the tax lawyer. Not get rid. I mean, you still have tax lawyers, but many of those intelligent people can do something else for the economy that is much better and much more useful for normal people, and will potentially create jobs and hopefully alleviate income inequality at the workers. So I think that's the difference between the two parties. Income inequality for the Democrats has to be their taxes. I believe taxes are too high. To me, 30% is, I mean, why should you have to give 30%? I mean, just in theory, to Washington, which, as I said before, they don't have to spend that money.
Okay, there's 2 points I'd like to address there. The most conservative estimate given by a conservative think tank would be that this rule change would result in $36.7 billion per year in additional revenue. We have a $1.5 trillion deficit right now in the federal government. The only way to overcome this deficit is by increasing tax revenue. And as for job creation, the U.S. added 11.5 million jobs during President Bill Clinton's first term, when the capital gains tax was over 29%. Obviously, there's no correlation there.
No, that's not obvious. That's one example. You need to go study the 1990s economy. You should also study the 2000 economy, which the years 2003 through 2007 are often overshadowed by the recessions that bookended it. But anyway, you said it yourself. I mean, you said $1.5 trillion, and he said $36.7 billion. Now, if you subtract those, you're going to have $1 trillion number. So that's not the only way to. That's not a way to alleviate the deficit. You said that was the only way. It's not the only way. The only way is to make Washington have less power, because clearly If you give them a little bit of power, they exploit it, and you have things like this, and you have things like that, and you have, I mean, seriously, if you turn on C-SPAN or C-SPAN 2, you can listen to either party, and they don't care about cutting spending. And right now they're talking about raising taxes so they can spend more money, and so that's not the proper way to go about it. We need to, the American people need to recognize the problem, and then demand that Washington changes fundamentally.
All right, well, the number I gave, 36.7 billion, was given by a conservative think tank. More optimistic, more reasonable numbers would be somewhere in the range of 50 billion. 50 billion is 3.2% of the 2011 U.S. federal budget, 2011 federal deficit. It's not an immediate solution, but it's definitely a step in the right direction.
It's not a step in the right direction because Washington spends more money than it takes in.
All right, why don't we go to question and answer period now? Oh, yeah, on this one, we've all got questions.
I mean, $37 billion is nothing. Like,
50. You gotta give them the best
Or
estimate.
$50 billion really, when the deficit's 1.5 trillion, the budget's 3.5 trillion, is really not much. So it seems much more like a showpiece than an actual solution. Especially, like, I don't think that really contributes much. That's just saying you're taxing the rich more and nothing changes. So what's like a real solution to fix the, the deficit, if you will? I know you say raising taxes is going to help, but you could tax all the wealth in the country and it really wouldn't close the deficit. So what's a better solution do you guys have? What's your solution to cut spending to further
Well,
close
I
that
mean,
gap?
obviously, bringing the deficit in would involve cutting back government and raising tax revenue. But tax revenue is absolutely necessary.
Well,
to beat the
I
deficit.
certainly agree with you, but economic growth typically grows the pie. I don't see how necessarily increasing taxes, particularly on the wealthy, but then, the government will figure out that they need to tax more, so they'll tax everybody. They'll implement a VAT or something. I don't understand how that would grow the pie or how that would incentivize Washington to cut spending.
I'm not following the pie metaphor.
Well, when people have more money to spend, they typically spend it, or they save it and it goes to the capital base and is used to grow the economy through loans. So the more money is in the system, typically the pie grows. So I'm just confused, what's the long-term solution? Because I don't think that 3.5%, using your number, 3.5% of the current deficit, that's not a solution, because it's still over $1.45 trillion. So what's like the long-term solution to close the deficit? What spending cuts could be made? What rules could be implemented that would institute that kind of spending cut?
I'm not going to argue about what needs to be cut in government. I'm going to argue that the rich in this country have succeeded because of the system in place. America is a great place where people that work hard can succeed and make a lot of money. But the time has come, after all these tax cuts, to pay back and help America in a dark time economically.
Okay, next question.
Hearing you talk about income inequality reminded me of Margaret Thatcher's farewell speech in House of Commons, where she said that her opposition would rather have the poor be poorer, provided that the rich are less rich. And I think when you talk about income inequality being your prime motivator for something, you run that risk. It's not talking about prosperity in general. It's talking about relative prosperity. And you can easily say that, well, Margaret Thatcher said that it's okay for the poor to be poor, provided that the rich are less rich. How do you respond?
I think the government can help people, and I think when we can rein the deficit in and gain America's credibility back at home and abroad, that taxing the rich can help all Americans.
Okay, yeah, we'll go over here behind you.
Just wondering, would you happen to know what percentage of the American population as a whole pays taxes?
Are you including like illegal immigrants, or?
Yeah, sure.
Not sure exactly. No.
Okay. So if you advocate this 30% tax people, like what percentage of the American population makes over 30%, or makes over
$1 million?
Yeah, what percentage of the American
All right. The Congressional Research Service, impartial in this, found that less than half of 1% would be affected by this. 94,500 millionaires.
Okay, but then if you have all these people who don't quite make all this,
Oh, I'm sorry.
why
That
not
was
put in like
That was a wrong
flat
number.
tax instead?
250,000. No. Yeah.
I mean, 47% don't pay income taxes, is the number.
Right, that's what the income tax.
Yeah.
That's what you're talking, because I think everyone pays some kind of tax.
Yeah, but income taxes, 47% of Americans don't pay.
Okay.
Just in case you don't.
John?
Well, while you were talking about fairness, you mentioned how you believe that some rich people pay more taxes than pay less in taxes than the middle class. Wouldn't it be more fair to say that rather we should raise the richest taxes to meet the middle class? Why don't we lower the middle class's taxes to below that of the rich? Wouldn't that be more fair? And we cut spending to offset that. Because then the middle class gets a tax. Then instead of making the rich people pay more taxes, we have the middle class pay less taxes, which would be more stimulating for the economy because the middle class could then use that money to buy essential services, save up for a rainy day, and invest it in bonds or college tuition.
Taxes are necessary for the federal government to run. And
I'm not talking about getting rid of all tax. I'm just saying middle class tax cut match with spending cuts.
I believe it requires a combination of increased taxes and cutting spending. Fix the deficit.
Okay. Oh, I'll wait.
I mean, you don't have to. I'm going to talk later and you'll hear me out. Here's what I don't get. Okay? This whole rule came about because basically Mitt Romney paid 15% tax rate because he has capital gains tax, correct?
Correct.
So he has a portfolio and it's completely risky. If Staples goes belly up, Mitt Romney's net worth plummets. So how do we reward people to invest in companies? Well, we say, well, if you take a very big risk, we're going to punish you less by a lower tax rate. Because if you have your money in a savings account, there's not a lot of risk. The FDIC will insure you up to a certain amount, $200,000, and it's just a far riskier investment. But if you're going to have all your money and your life savings in the market and in a company, you're basically a leaf in the wind to whatever happens to that company. My point is, what do you say to investors at that point? That if you actually are successful in your investing, we're going to punish you, and then disincentivize the risk to invest in markets, to invest in companies and corporations, to have your life savings, owned by GE or Staples, and the market dictate. Doesn't that disincentivize it?
It's not about punishing the successful. It's about asking the successful to pay their fair share after they've already succeeded.
Okay, now to it. I'd just like to point out the number of loggers and paper manufacturers and bookbinders that would be put out of business if you reduced this 98%.
That's true. It looks like there'd be a lot of them.
You say you're about creating jobs, Vikram, but...
I didn't say that today. I said it last time, and I won that debate, so I know how to create jobs.
Okay, thank you very much.
I come from Texas. We know how to create jobs.
So I hear.
First-hand experience.
All right, thank you. Oh, closing arguments, right. Sorry. Eric, go ahead.
Okay, the 2011 federal deficit was $1.56 trillion. This deficit hurts American credibility at home and abroad. Deficit reduction is necessary for economic recovery and growth. Increased tax revenue is the only feasible way to eventually overcome this deficit. America's wealthiest have achieved an incredible standard of living thanks to Bush-era tax cuts, to the detriment of the country. Now America's wealthiest have an opportunity to help this nation recover from an unprecedented economic crisis. Paying their fair share in these times is not only fair, it is an act expected of patriotic citizens concerned for the future of our country.
Yeah, they do have an opportunity to help us recover from the crisis, and they do that because, as you can see from the charity numbers, the amount of money that our folks give to charity is far above second place, which I think is like England or something like that. But speaking of England, they've tried raising taxes. They have austerity measures, and their economy is not growing too fast. But I have some cool numbers I never got to bring up because nobody ever asked me a question. But let's see, revenue. 2003 through 2007, we had a 43% increase in revenue, and I think that's directly related to our capital gains tax and all the other tax cuts from the Bush tax cuts. Nobody ever talks about it because we had huge deficits because of Iraq war and all that, and that's a different discussion. But the revenue that was coming into the government was incredible. It went from 1.78 trillion in 2003 to 2.56 trillion in 2007. And I have other stuff, I don't have time. And yeah, so instead of relying on the leadership in Washington, the American people need to forget the buffer rule, look at more sensible ways of reducing income inequality and closing our deficits, and unite against Washington nonsense and demand that the tax code is reformed by becoming simpler, more understandable, and less loophole-ridden.
Thank you very much. Sorry.
So I'm good.
It's kind of a bad bag. So Brian and Rebecca?
Hello?
Rebecca, do you want to go first? Sure. Okay, let me just read the question. President Obama has told religious groups and hospitals they must provide contraception to those they provide health care to, regardless of their religious beliefs on the matter. Is that appropriate government behavior?
I'd like to begin with the oath of the President of the United States, which President Obama himself took. I do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of the President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve and protect the Constitution of the United States. It's a short statement, but it's a very important one. The President has taken the oath to protect the Constitution according to the best of his ability. Not when he feels like it, not when it's convenient for him, and not if it doesn't get in the way of this health care plan. It seems that Obama has either forgotten the oath he took or has forgotten the First Amendment. The Catholic Church takes a clear stance against birth control and abortifacient drugs. Yet the President, Kathleen Sebelius, and their new HHS mandate have told the Catholic Church and any other religiously against birth control that their view does not matter. This is not a debate about birth control. This is a discussion about how the President has to attack religious groups because they may make his health care agenda a little more difficult for him. President Obama himself has said, "Our founders designed a system that makes it more difficult to bring about change than I would like sometimes." I think we can all realize that the founding fathers set this country up the way they did for a reason. The church has already made its stance clear. So why would the President and his administration force churches, hospitals, and schools to provide and pay for something so against their fundamental beliefs?
Okay, we've got to call it there. So.
Okay.
Thank you. Well, this is a big disaster of an issue for the Republican Party, and I think that the Republican side of the issue knows this. Fundamentally, the issue is not not a matter of separation of church and state, as Rebecca alluded to. This really is an issue of women's rights and female health care in this country. What the current Obama administration policy acknowledges is that employers are not doctors, and they should not be treated as such, or the vast majority of employers are not doctors. For example, Fordham, as a Catholic institution, under the opposing side's logic, might have a problem with their female employees seeking birth control, seeking contraception for very legitimate medical reasons. But the fact of the matter is, again, they are not doctors and they are not qualified to make that kind of determination. Now, we have probably all heard about this woman, Sandra Fluke, who testified before Congress a couple weeks ago. I'm sure you guys all heard Rush Limbaugh's very endearing comments about her. But essentially what she was saying was one of her colleagues at law school needed birth control, not so that she could have rampant sexual intercourse at her leisure, but because she had a serious medical condition that the birth control pill would have prevented. And because her...
Rebecca, I'm sorry, I cut you off a little bit too early. I was going 1 minute, so to start, I'm clearly not qualified for this job. So to go ahead and start the 5 minutes, why don't you finish up what you're going to say, and then we'll start it from there.
That is unless Obama is going to war against the church. What is at stake here is for these institutions to be closed as a result of having to compromise their beliefs. Is Obama trying to alienate and lose a whole block of voters here? Why else would he so pointedly be oppressing organized religion? The bishops of this country and other religious leaders have made their complaints known, but the president either discredits or ignores them. Even still, Cardinal Dolan has let it known that the president, as sort of compromises, has set up meetings to iron out the wrinkles of this issue. And what it turns out to be is that the president is lecturing Catholic bishops about their own religion. This is a president who is very much so trying to take control of the church.
That's really not true, though, because what the current Obama administration policy says is that if you are a particular employer who doesn't agree with certain medical coverage provided to your employees, then you're not required to pay for it. So Barack Obama isn't telling churches to use their collection money to buy women condoms. They're giving certain employers with particular perspectives and views on this issue to allow their insurance companies to pay for it instead. So it really is not correct or fair for the opposition to say that this is Barack Obama going in and telling churches what to do. The fact of the matter is, if you are an employee in the United States, then you have certain rights, regardless of the particular disposition or beliefs of your employer. Women don't lose their right to their medical coverage in consultation with their own physician just because they happen to work for a group that might not agree that doctors are more qualified to make medical decisions than religious leaders.
It's not that the church is trying to be a doctor. The church has a very clear stance against birth control for religious reasons. And so it's not just a women's rights issue, because that's what it's being dressed up to be. Birth control, you can still get it for free. They have Planned Parenthood clinics, they have many other clinics. You can acquire birth control and many forms of it very inexpensively at a drugstore. And to kind of refer to this compromise here, churches and institutions and hospitals still have to tell their employers, here's where you can go to have something done that I don't agree with. So I don't think it's a women's rights issue, and women are not being denied birth control. They're not being denied their rights. So why does the church have to be denied the right that they believe, their rights that they believe birth control is not necessary?
Well, you're right.
They're not telling anyone that they can't have birth control.
You're right. Right now that isn't happening because the Obama administration has the backbone and the dignity to understand that this is a legitimate women's rights issue. But what's at stake here is the fact that if a woman and her doctor both come to the determination that that person needs certain forms of birth control for legitimate medical reasons, and again, I want to bring up the particular case of Sandra Fluke's colleague who developed an ovarian cyst because she could not afford to pay for the birth control pill. That's a very serious concern, and that's not like the Republican side likes to twist this as it's about passing out condoms and it's about people having sex without being open to procreation, which is the church's position, and no one's denying that that's a valid religious belief. What we are saying, though, is that, again, if you work in this country, you have the right to certain medical benefits from your insurance company. And it really shouldn't matter what your employer thinks, regardless of who your employer is, because you're still a person with rights in this country.
I'm not denying that an ovarian cyst isn't a serious medical problem, but why would that have to be provided by an employer when birth control is it's easy to acquire in this country? No one is telling them you can't have birth control for that issue. Their church is just saying, let us stay out of this because this is our belief system. And
that's what President Obama's policy does. President Obama's policy says if you have a moral or a religious problem with certain health care that your employers might get, you're not required to pay for it. That's the role of the insurance company. So again, we're not talking about forcing churches or forcing religious organizations to do anything here. All we're saying is that the health care that's provided to their employees must include things that cover legitimate medical things such as birth control. It's a very serious matter when you're a woman and your estrogen levels have to be in a certain configuration. I'm not a physician, obviously, as you can tell by what I just said, but the fact of the matter is birth control is not free. It's not easily accessible. I mean, I've never taken the pill. I don't have any reason to know how much the birth control pill costs. But to me, it's a little absurd to say that healthcare is easily accessible, at least in terms of the birth control pill.
Well, just acquiring this birth control, would you say it trumps freedom of religion?
No, because we're not making any religious determination here. It doesn't matter what your religious views are or what your religious views of your employer are. If you work in this country and you have health insurance, your employer shouldn't be able to go in there and say, oh, no, I've got a really big problem with you accessing birth control, so you're not allowed to have that. Let's take it one step further. What if I have some crazy religion, which is no less valid than Christianity's, where I think that women who give birth shouldn't be allowed to have epidurals? Does that mean that suddenly you're not allowed to have that from your health insurance provider just because it's my religious belief? We have to take this to the most extreme level possible, because it really is a slippery slope. When employers who are not qualified to make medical determinations do so, that puts not only women, but all workers in this country in a very precarious situation. And Barack Obama's administration realizes that, and they should be commended for standing up for the rights of all Americans, including women.
But they're not making a medical determination, they're being in touch with their beliefs. They're making sure that they don't have to compromise their conscience.
They're being in touch.
I hate to cut this off because Lord knows what's coming next, but I got the order wrong last time on the closing statements and stuff, so go ahead and do your closing statements now.
That is written wrong.
Oh, it is written
question
wrong.
First, yeah,
So I
it's
was
on me.
actually right.
You were right, you were right. That's why I didn't stop you before.
I thought it was to not embarrass me.
No, absolutely not.
All right, you wouldn't do that. Okay, Rebecca, or let's go Q&A, sorry. Let's get some people who haven't been involved already. Okay, DJ.
Bill on what Brian said, what if my employer was a Christian Scientist who believes that no medical practices are valid or that you should get prayed over to cure your illness? Should they too, since this precedent that's going to be set is that religions can morally object to medical practices, if my employer is a Christian Scientist, I shouldn't be allowed to get any medical procedures, or should I have to pay out of my own pocket since healthcare is apparently so readily available?
I would not suggest working for a Christian Scientist who has that belief if healthcare is supposed to be provided by your employer. Then I would suggest to work with someone else.
Well, many times people don't have that choice, TJ. I think that's a really good argument to bring up. And just to build off what Rebecca said before, if you personally don't want to avail yourself of your right to access birth control through your healthcare provider that's provided for by your employer, you don't have to. No one is forcing you to take the birth control pill, to use condoms, to use birth control. All we're saying is that, you can make your own personal choices as an employee, but please don't go telling my friend who has a different belief or separate medical needs from you what he or she can and can't do based on your beliefs. It's not right. It's not the American way.
Next question. We have no women who want to speak up on this question? It's like Congress.
Exactly, yeah. You're a Republican House Senator.
Well, I mean, you're debating woman, so I guess that kind of speaking out about it. But
right.
On the topic, you talk about how expensive birth control can be, but and particularly you're citing Sandra Fluke, who goes to Georgetown Law Center.
Mm-hmm.
But the Daily Caller reported that the nearest Target to Georgetown sells 1 month worth of birth control pills for $9. So it doesn't really seem to stand up to the test of the marketplace.
Well, maybe $9 is something that you and I can afford, but the fact of the matter, that's an irrelevant issue because what you're saying is that just because something is inexpensive in one particular area doesn't mean that all Americans in all situations of all levels of income should have the same right to access health care. I don't care where you go, I don't care how much it costs, I don't care if it's free. The fact of the matter is your employer has absolutely no right to step in between what you and your doctors say. And that's something that a lot of conservatives have a problem with. Like whenever we hear talk about healthcare, it's always, oh, well, we don't want the government stepping in between people and their doctors. That's exactly what's happening here, but the conservative side miraculously seems to have the opposite perspective.
Yeah, TW.
First of all, I think this highlights just how ridiculous our healthcare system is, that we can't own our own insurance, which is something the president doesn't want to do. He wants to double down on the employer base. But this is neither here nor there that he'll make this worse. But you make the claim that, oh, what if you work for a Christian Scientist and he denies you healthcare coverage? Let's turn it around. The Barack Obama administration is telling the Catholic Church what it can and can't do. Where does it stop there? Can Barack Obama say, I have a problem with you having wine and Mass? I got a problem with that. There's kids there. Alcohol with kids could be a bad mix. They might be alcoholics. Where does it stop? Where does it stop? You guys, the Democrats are so quick to jump out at religious freedom and defending it. But how quickly that goes away when something like this happens. Very, to me, you can spin it either way. And to me, this is a religious issue because you're telling Catholics, who, by the way, let me quick note, they said they will close down Catholic hospitals if this stands up. So you're willing to close Catholic hospitals all across the country, just as they did when gay marriage was approved in Massachusetts, and they shut down the biggest adoption provider in the state, shut it down. They shut it down. You're willing to do that because you believe that a religion cannot decide for itself what it believes and what it doesn't believe.
First of all, I never argued that we should be closing down Catholic hospitals.
They will.
But I mentioned that's
They
at
will.
stake here.
But please don't put words in my mouth. I never said that before.
But they will. I didn't say you did.
This is not a matter of religion. It really is not. Because what we're arguing is, what if an employer believes something? Should that have any bearing on what their employees get from their health care coverage? So what if I'm a small business owner that it has nothing to do with religion at all, but I just happen to believe that contraception is immoral? That's maybe a perfectly valid religious belief, but just because I'm not a religious organization does not mean that I have any more right than the church to intervene in healthcare. Let me finish. So, Barack Obama is not going into church. He's not saying, you have to be doing it, you have to be having your masses, in a particular way. It had really, at its most fundamental level, it has absolutely nothing to do with religion. It has to do with what employers with any kind of certain beliefs, what rights they have to limit their employees' access to health care. Could be a church, could be a mosque, it could be Brian's ice cream shop. Doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is, employers should not be allowed to tell their employees and their doctors what's best for them.
Okay, the rules say we gotta call it there. Would you like to do closing statements? Do you want to start?
Sure. One has to wonder if forced birth control and abortifacient coverage is about women's health or just more so about the state trying to control its people. Kathleen Sebelius has even pointed out that more birth control means less people, and so lowers health care coverage costs for those who have already been born. This is starting to sound more like China's one-child policy. Some may balk at this claim, but if we continue to deny religious rights for its own citizens, then a path of tyranny is very much so where the United States may be headed. Also, nobody is trying to make it so that you cannot buy or acquire birth control, something which comes in many forms and is readily available inexpensively at drugstores and even for free at some clinics. To call it solely a woman's health care issue is hiding what this issue is really about. To expect the government to stay out of your bedroom but to also fit the bill for your birth control is unfair. And to do so when it compromises someone's religious belief is infringing on the religious rights of others and is frankly unconstitutional. To protect the freedom of religion is something this nation has prided itself on doing since its founding over 200 years ago. We should not allow the administration of one president to take away those rights now for the sake of his healthcare agenda and claim it just to be a women's healthcare issue.
Thank you, Rebecca. Brian?
So I just want to reiterate that it is in fact a matter of not just female rights in this country, but the rights of all workers. I think that's well established. I think that we have certainly shown that employers have no right to tell their employees' doctors what they can and cannot have access to via their health insurance. But I want to make a larger point. This issue really is a distraction on the part of the National Republican Party. And it really speaks to the selective conservative outrage when it comes to social issues, particularly issues of separation of church and state. The conservative side of American politics loves to step in whenever the Catholic Church or Christianity is compromised or questioned in any way at all. But where was this side of the argument when, for example, the Ground Zero Mosque was being built? This seems like so many Republicans were coming out and saying that this mosque should not be built, but why the selective outrage? Why aren't they now on this same side where the government is coming in and telling a particular group with particular beliefs what they can and can't do? Where are they when it comes to racial profiling and religious profiling? It's a double standard and it needs to be recognized.
Thank you both very much. Now it's the all initials debate between TW and DJ. And the question for this one is, who is the best post-Civil War president and why? What can our current president learn from him? Keep alternating and
First of all, I want to thank on behalf of the College Republicans, and I'm sure the College Democrats, want to thank y'all for coming out. You all look great. It's awesome to see that on Thursday night you'd be willing to come and watch people debate politics. It's wonderful. Anyway, who's the best? Who is the best president of the post-Civil War period? The answer seems too easy for Republicans. Ronald Reagan.
a man who changed the world and was so overwhelmingly popular, he only lost one state in his re-election bid. However, because part of the question calls for lessons to be extracted, my answer is actually going to change a bit to the man that Ronald Reagan would have said had he been debating this instead of me. Yes, the best post-Civil War president is cool Calvin Coolidge. He once said, which rings especially true today in his famous and my favorite speech, "Have faith in Massachusetts," which became a national sensation. I might need a little bit more time. The welfare of the weakest and the welfare of the most powerful are inseparably bound together. Industry cannot flourish if labor languish. Transportation cannot prosper if manufacturers decline. The general welfare cannot be provided in any one act, but it is well to remember that the benefit of one is the benefit of all, and the neglect of one is the neglect of all. The suspension of one man's dividends is the suspension of another man's pay envelope. Calvin was born on a farm in Vermont and grew up a Massachusetts man like myself. He was a small government crusader and at one point cut all income taxes for everyone outside of the top 2 wealthiest individuals. The result? The most prosperous time in U.S. history, the Roaring 20s. On the foreign policy side, he formed a peace treaty with all European allies and was an early denouncer of communism. After his time in office, he was revered until the democratic slander took hold years later as it looked for a scapegoat. You see, history sets a precedent for success, and Barack Obama would do well to remember that. Small government equals big freedom, and big freedom equals big responsibility, but big opportunity. The longer we continue down the Obama path of big government and big regulation, the further we head toward a decrease in our freedoms and eventually a useless economic structure. So let's stay cool with Calvin Coolidge, as his old campaign motto used to state, and return to policies that create an economic boom, not bust. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello again. Luckily, I was prepared for this. For some reason, I knew that TW was going to pick Calvin Coolidge. I'll be arguing that our greatest president since the Civil War, and indeed our greatest president in the history of our nation, was the 32nd president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. President Roosevelt led us through World War II, he led us through the Great Depression, and into a brighter future through his domestic and foreign policies. Following the disastrous presidencies of Warren Harding,